Okay, so I have to be honest. I'm jumping in on a series that I didn't start, and I'm never good at that. So I'm going to do my best, and you guys will have to bear with me. So last week, Abuna started part one of a 4-week series called Church the Real Deal. So what we're doing in this series is we're going to draw some parallels between the first church and how our church has maintained some of the principles of the first church. So last week, I believe Abuna talked about a church of prayer and the power of prayer, the power of group prayer, and how prayer accomplishes much. This week, we're going to talk about how our church is a church of fellowship. So, my theme verse for this talk is this Acts 2, verses 41 to 47. So, I will just read it out loud. So, then those who gladly received his word were baptized, and that day about 3,000 souls were added to them. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, in the breaking of bread and in prayers. Then fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. Now all who believed were together and had all things in common, and sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all as anyone had need. So continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people, and the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved. So there is a lot happening in this verse, a lot. We're not going to go through everything because this really is like a framework for some of the principles of the first church, but we're just going to talk about the parts of this that are relevant to specific. Before we do that, what is fellowship? I was having this discussion with my husband yesterday about fellowship and a church of fellowship, and he actually made the comment that a lot of people don't know what fellowship actually is. When people think of fellowship, they think about, coffee and donuts before a meeting. Whenever we use that term lightly, we just say, oh, like we'll have a fellowship meal together before we do whatever. And so that term sometimes gets taken with some level of superficial meaning. And nobody actually digs deep into what that term actually means. What is fellowship? Why is it important? Why is it something that's referenced so frequently in Acts and actually all over the Bible? What is fellowship? Why is it something that we're focused on? Why is it a principle of the first church that we have maintained and that we want to continue to maintain going forward? What is it? So I'm a big fan of linguistics in general. I have a bunch of texts and a bunch of apps on my phone that bring up the original translation, and then it defines the word from the original translation, because sometimes I feel like I understand it a little bit better if I know the context of the wording that they use. So when you pull up this verse in Acts and you go to the Greek word, the Greek word is koinonia. And so this is literally like a screenshot from the app that I use to bring up the original languages. And when you look at the definition of the word koinonia, it's more than just coffee and donuts before a meal. It's more than just superficial, like let's have a bite together before we do whatever. There is so much more to it. It's fellowship, it's communion, it's like association, it's community, it's participation, it's intimacy. Fellowship is more than just being in the same place at the same time, or fellowship is more than just having, your church or your service as a common interest. Fellowship is intimacy. Fellowship is unity. Fellowship is the sharing of one common purpose, one perspective, one approach, one everything. Fellowship is oneness. You're not in fellowship with somebody if you've had coffee with them, because that almost degrades the meaning of the term fellowship or koinonia, because there are so many more layers than what we give it when we just look at it superficially. So what is fellowship? What is this that we're trying to accomplish? What is this that the church has maintained so closely? What I think, and this is just me, okay, that fellowship is our spiritual duty to stimulate each other to holiness and faithfulness. It's a sharing of the spiritual life and growth together. Okay, that's great. And that's a definition that's wonderful. And I'm sure you guys could all come up with your own much better definitions. But what brings a point home to me a little bit more is examples. So what are examples of fellowship? How do we show fellowship? How do we participate? How do we become that is rooted in fellowship. What does that look like? I mean, when I don't know, I go to the Bible. And if you look through the New Testament specifically, fellowship is most often expressed in commands. And the commands usually end with one another, right? And if you actually just go into like whatever your search engine is, BibleGateway.com or whatever you use, and you type in one another, the amount of hits that you will get, and all of those are definitions and examples of what fellowship looks like. And all of those things are part of the reason why our church persisted this long. And we'll go through them in detail in a little bit, but fellowship is part of the foundational principles that strengthen our church to continue throughout whatever. And so what does that look like? Let's get into it. Okay, so let's go Romans 12:10 first. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor, giving preference to one another. What does that mean? Giving preference to one another, putting the person that you're serving with or whatever you're doing, whatever context the fellowship is in, giving preference to that person, putting that person's needs and their interests above your own. That's not a superficial coffee date. Putting somebody's interests above your own is a much deeper layer of intimacy than just, standing behind somebody in the coffee line before you do whatever you're doing at church. Be of the same mind toward one another. This is something that I think is critical for the service. Like it's critical because your delivery might be different and your approach might be different. But if you have the same mind, if you have the same perspective, if you have the same goal and the same outcome, that will strengthen your service like to the nth degree. Being of the same mind, while it's difficult to achieve, can accomplish so much if we can get there. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for he who loves another has fulfilled the law. So I am uncomfortable with using the word love very lightly. Those who know me personally know that I can't just like throw that word around. Like that's it's a little much for me. But if I'm being honest with myself and in my service, okay, if I don't love the people that I serve with, I'm not in fellowship with them. I'm not. And that might be hard for some people to swallow because you serve with whoever, I don't know, whoever. You don't have to be best friends with everybody that you serve with. But the reality is, if you don't have love for the people that you serve with, you don't have fellowship with them, because fellowship is not superficial. Fellowship is a foundational principle that can carry your service and your church through very difficult times. And something that is that foundational cannot be based on something so superficial. So the reality is, part of fellowship is love. And you can serve without fellowship, but you cannot have fellowship without love. Therefore, let us not judge one another anymore, but rather resolve this, not to put a stumbling block or a cause to fall in our brother's way. So, again, I'm going to talk about fellowship in the context of service, right? Like in the context of people that you serve with, or your service versus people who are, doing a parallel service or whatever, okay? The first thing that we talked about, or one of the first things, is love. That there is no fellowship without love. Love has to be there in everything. And although this is a little bit hard to swallow, particularly if you're not practicing this, it's logical, right? Because his command is for us to love everybody. So why is our service exempt from that, right? The second part of that is not judging one another. It is a lot easier for me to not judge somebody that I love than somebody that I don't. So for example, okay, if I'm serving with my husband, let's say, and my husband does something that I disagree with, I'm not going to judge him for it. I'm not going to write this narrative about this must be his motivation and blah, blah, blah. And he must be very self-serving and this and that. And he just wants people to notice him. I'm not going to go to that point because I love him. And if I love him, then my first instinct is to give him the benefit of the doubt. Similarly, okay, I made a vow with my best friend that we would never serve together because it would probably be the end of our friendship because we're very, very different. But had I been serving with one of my best friends, again, it would not be my first reaction to a situation to judge her because I love her and I know her. And I know that this is probably not what it appears. There must be more. It would prompt me to dig a little bit deeper. But when we serve without fellowship, okay, and therefore without love, it's very easy for us, like at the first sign of a conflict or at the first sign of anything, to just stumble into this like judgment and to just like let this knee-jerk reaction like gain momentum because we're serving without fellowship. Like the idea of serving in fellowship with love could actually preempt quite a lot of issues. And none of us here are naive, okay? None of us think that servants are perfect and we all get along perfectly and there's never any drama and there's never any conflict. Everybody knows that that's not the case, okay? It happens. And the issue is not like that we disagree. The issue is not that disagreements happen. The issue is what's the common purpose and how are those disagreements dealt with? If they're explosive, we're not serving in fellowship. Like people can disagree, and the more fiery you are about the service, the more likely you are to disagree because you feel like you want to do the best possible thing with the service. But the issue is not the disagreement. The issue is what happens behind the scenes of a disagreement. Is there judgment? Is there writing your narrative about what the other person's motivations are, what their intentions are, and what they must mean, and what they must be thinking? If that's the case, is it because we're serving not in fellowship? Because once you love somebody and you are in fellowship with them, it is a lot easier to give them the benefit of the doubt or to ask questions rather than to judge one another. Therefore, let us pursue the things which make for peace and the things by which one may edify another. Same train of thought. Same train of thought. Okay. There are, and I'm going to talk about my personal experience, okay? Like not specifically in OnRoute, but like I've been serving for years and years and years, since as far as back as I can remember. And there have been many times where, you know, two servants that are serving together, they just don't click, okay? And like, there's nothing that that person can do that's correct. And you're just like, at anything that they do, oh, this is why they're wrong. And this is, and there's all this like back talk, and there's all this like, you know, undercover annoyance and I don't know, resentment or whatever it is. Okay. And that is not the pursuit of things which make for peace. Okay. That is the pursuit of self-righteousness. All the things that they do wrong make me feel like a better servant because I can point out what's wrong. And oh, I would never do that. Oh, I would never do that. That's terrible. I would never do that. That is not the pursuit of things which make for peace. And the reason that that happens is because we're serving out of fellowship. If we were serving in fellowship, the pursuit of things which make for peace would be easy to do because we are all like one common purpose, one common outcome. And the things which edify each other would be easy because we're all working towards the same goal. But when we don't do that, the question is, are we in fellowship? I only added this one, 1 Corinthians 11:33, as a joke, okay? I'm going to mention my best friend again. When we were in university, she used to drive me crazy, okay? We would tell each other that we're going to go and we're going to grab lunch or whatever in between whatever classes. And I would get there and she's already ordered her food and she's like 3/4 of the way through. And it used to drive me insane. And then I came across this out of context, okay? I'm going to just disclaimer that I understand that this verse is out of context, but I would every time text it to her. Or if she's telling me, okay, let's meet for lunch, I would say, okay, I'm down, and then text her this verse. My brethren, when you come together to eat, wait for one another. Please, please, okay? One of my pet peeves is I don't like to eat by myself. Like I'd rather, like for me, eating is a social thing. It's not a solitary thing. It's not a survival thing. It's very much social. And I mean, we made the joke at the beginning of this talk about, you know, coffee and donuts and whatever, but there is something to be said for doing that together. But this is more of a joke, and she's going to judge me for it later. Okay, back to the seriousness of the talk. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. This, for me, is very key, okay? This right here gives, when I first read it, gave me a fraction of the understanding of the depth of fellowship. Okay? Think about what this actually means. Bear one another's burdens. Okay? That means that, let's say you're serving with whoever, okay, and whatever happens in their life, and the night before their service, they text and say, "Hey guys, I can't make it. I know that this is my week, but I can't make it. Can somebody fill in?" Okay? The difference between servants in fellowship and servants not in fellowship is the ones not in fellowship, they flaked again. Now we all have to pick up the slack. I'm not prepared. Blah, blah, blah. Why do I always have to fix people's mistakes? Blah, 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 blah. Okay? Not in fellowship. The servants who are in fellowship, their initial response is, "Are you okay? Is everything all right? Don't worry about that. We'll handle it. But are you okay?" This is a very difficult first reaction, particularly when you're serving in a group that is not in fellowship. Because when you're not in fellowship, everybody feels like their efforts should be acknowledged, and everything that they do that is over and above their allotted weeks or their whatever should be acknowledged. That's the wrong mentality. That's the wrong mentality. We talked a little bit earlier about how fellowship and love go hand in hand. That's the wrong mentality. I don't sit here at home with my husband, who I love, and count every dish that he washed and compare it to however many dishes I washed. I don't really wash dishes, so that would be an unfair comparison, but in general, okay? That's not fellowship. That's not bearing one another's burdens. That's not feeling the weight of whatever they're carrying as though you're carrying it yourself. That's not fellowship. So when we talk about fellowship superficially and loosely, like it's just coffee and donuts, that's not even a fraction of what it is. Fellowship is bearing one another's burdens, carrying their stresses and their problems as though they are your own, feeling for them and empathizing with them as though what they're going through is what you're going through. That is fellowship. Are we serving in fellowship? Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. This one seems easy to do. Be kind to one another. If you're explosively yelling at each other in service, there's probably bigger issues there. But the bigger thing here is forgiving one another. Okay, not holding anything against another person, whatever happened, whatever the disagreement, whatever the issue was, being able to do that, and it not being optional. Okay, a lot of the times when we're in service, okay, we view our relationship with the other servants as disposable, right? I'm not yoked to these people, I just serve with them, that's it. I would argue that that's the wrong mentality. Okay, I don't treat my family that way. Okay, if I'm mad at my daughter for something, almost never happens because whatever, but let's say, okay, yes, I'm sure it's coming, it's not optional for me to forgive her. If I'm having a fight with my husband, it's not optional that we'll get over this. Okay, it's, I'm mad right now, but in the back of all of our minds, we all know that this is going to get resolved. That it's not optional. Okay, it's not a question. I'm just mad right now, but that doesn't at all mean that I'm leaving. That's not how it works, because it's not optional. If we are in fellowship with whoever, the people that we serve with, it's the same thing. Resolving this and going back to being kind and tenderhearted is not optional. These relationships are not disposable. If you are serving in fellowship, then your relationship with the other servants is not disposable. It's not something that you can take lightly, and it's not something that is optional to mend or not mend. Your team of servants that you're serving with are like your family. You don't choose your siblings. You also similarly don't get to choose who God decided is going to serve with you. And so your relationships with them are not optional. And forgiving each other and getting past whatever this is not optional, as long as you all have one common purpose ahead of you. As long as you are in fellowship. Do you see how, like, when you dig a little bit deeper into what the term fellowship actually is, the amount of responsibility that comes with the term is so much more than what we thought? Like, the idea that your relationships with these people who are theoretically outside of your family are not disposable and they're not optional if you are serving in fellowship. Finally, all of you, be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers, be tender-hearted and be courteous. For me, this is the one mind part. Like the key word, the operative phrase here is being of one mind. And I don't at all think that this means that your delivery and your approach and everything about you has to be the same. Not at all. And I actually encourage diverse groups of servants who can bring many angles to the table and who can look at a service and decide this person is better at doing it from this side and this person better at doing it from this side, and that then strengthens the entire service. Being of one mind means having a common goal and a common purpose, and everybody being on the same page about why you're there and what you are there to do. How you do it is going to be different depending on the personalities that are there, and that's great. And that's why God has put this like mosaic of servants together. That's great. But one mind is having the same purpose. And everybody knows what we're all trying to accomplish here, and it's one goal. Like it's like this a mission and vision. Everybody's on the same page about that. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. The grumbling is the key for me here. Okay, you can like be hospitable, be kind, be compassionate, be everything. All of the you can say anything there. The operative phrase there is without grumbling. Okay, and like I said earlier, it is a lot easier to do that without grumbling when you are in fellowship. Okay, like I'll give you an example. Okay, I'm not in fellowship with some of the people that I work with. I'm not. Okay, like we're drowning at home with the kids being home and the daycare's being closed and blah blah blah. And every time I'm on a very important call, like in my office, or whatever, at work, all of the higher ups are calling me from home, and they're all in their home offices, and their kids are running around, and that's completely fine because they're home. Okay, and I'm sitting there like I know my kids are ripping someone to pieces at home. Like I feel like I need to be home, and these people are calling me from their home offices daily, every day. Okay, and I wish that I could be home, but I can't be. I just can't be. Like my situation at work, like I can't be home. I need to be in the office. Okay, I grumble about that. Every time my boss calls me and he calls me from home, I grumble. Okay. Every time the VP calls me and he calls me from home, I grumble. I am grumbling nonstop about these people. I'm grumbling. Okay. My husband has days where he works from home. No grumbling. I'm happy. Please be home more. Like I'm happy to be in the office. I love going to work. I'm not a homebody. Whether on the days where I want to be home or don't want to be home, it doesn't matter if Rami's home. If he's home, no grumbling. Please stay home. Is that better for you? Does that make you happy? Does that work better for you? Stay home. Stay safe. Great. The difference is I'm not in fellowship with the people I work with. It's a lot easier for me to grumble about them. It is a lot harder for me to grumble about my husband because I love him, because I'm in fellowship with him. And my first instinct is not to poke holes in whatever he's doing. It's the same with fellowship. It's the same with your team of servants. Your first reaction should never be to poke holes in what they're doing. Because the assumption, if you are in fellowship, is that you are of one mind. And there is no grumbling. I'm sure grumbling will happen. Don't get me wrong. That's probably unrealistic for me to say that there's no grumbling. But the predisposition to grumble should not be like a knee-jerk reaction if you are in fellowship. To me, this is like the perfect summary of their living fellowship. So continuing daily with one accord, like with togetherness, okay? And breaking bread from house to house. They're going to each person's house and doing the same thing. It's like a small groups that rotates everybody's house. They ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart. Like there's no back talk, no like misinterpretation of people's intentions and people's motivations. It's just gladness and simplicity of heart. Everybody's glad to be together. Everybody's glad to be serving together. Everybody's glad to be under the same roof, breaking bread, celebrating what they know to be true, which is that God has saved us. Like, it's just simplicity. There's no like, there's no like passive aggressive comments and this and that. It's just gladness and simplicity, praising God and having favor with all the people. Like, this to me is the summary of how they lived their fellowship. One accord, gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God. That's it right there. One accord, gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God. That right there to me is how they lived fellowship. That's how they did it. And like, having favor with all the people, yeah, you know what? Like, I am drawn to people who are happy. I am drawn to people who are glad and simple of heart. I'm drawn to those people. I imagine that they had favor with all the people because I want to be around people like that. I want to serve with people like that. Like, in my peak of service, like if I were to go back in my life, I'm old and gray now and like I'm running out of steam. But if I were to look back and think about my peak of service when I was like the most on fire for God and when service was my life and it was everything to me, I can also like draw a parallel to when my fellowship with my servants was the strongest. Like, my peak of service also corresponds with my peak of strong and grounded fellowship with the people that I served with. Like, to the point where like I was so much in fellowship with some of my fellow servants that like one of the servants that I served with and I could go up there and give a talk together. Like, I don't know if you guys know, it's extremely difficult to do that, to give a talk with somebody else. Okay. But her and I, we could go up there and we could give a talk together and we would be finishing each other's sentences and like bouncing off each other. And she was the good cop and I was the bad cop. And she was the like, huffy fluffy, like love and everything is great. And Christianity is made of butterflies and lollipops. And I was the do this better and be better. And the onus is on you. And we had a dynamic going. To this day, I haven't been able to find somebody that I can do that with. It's very difficult to give a talk with somebody else because everybody's got their own perspective and everybody's got their own like flow of their thoughts. But we were so in fellowship that we could do that. We could finish each other's talks. I could be preparing part 1 of a series and she'd be doing part 2 and she could call me the night before and I could jump in on part 2 because I know exactly where she's going and I know what she's thinking because we were in fellowship. The peak of my service was also the peak of the fellowship with the other servants. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I don't think that that's arbitrary. I think that part of the strength of a service is tied to the fellowship because part of the foundational principles of our church is tied to fellowship. Sorry, technical difficulties. Why is fellowship important? Why do I keep saying that it's one of the foundational principles that we have in our church? Why is this one of the characteristics of the first church that we picked, that we want to continue, that we have continued, that we want to keep going forward? Why? Like, now we've talked about what fellowship is. Okay, great. It's a greater responsibility than just having coffee with your servants. It's a greater responsibility than just being nice to each other. It's a greater responsibility than just exchanging numbers so you can figure out who's doing the talk this week or who's doing the whatever services this week. Okay, we know that now it's more. We know that it's bearing one another's burdens. We know that it's having love for your fellow servants. We know that it's like carrying each other's weight and feeling for each other and no grumbling and forgiving one another and understanding that your relationship with that servant is not disposable. Okay, great. Why is that important? By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. How can we teach other people about love if we don't love the people that we serve with? Like, how can I bring people to God? How can I teach them that his love saves me every day and his love is my like it's my fuel. It's my like it's the reason that I breathe. If I can't then take that and show that to the people that are standing next to me as I'm telling this person that, how can I do that? Like, how can I imagine that my like terrible relationships with the people who serve with me will not then impact the people that I'm talking to? Like, if I'm sitting here talking to you guys right now, and behind the scenes, me and like Abuna are telling each other off, how do I have any credibility? How do I have a leg to stand on to tell you that his love saves, that his love is everything? I don't. I don't. I love you, Abuna. Okay, I do. We're not fighting. Okay, but your fellowship with your servants and the people that you serve with has an impact on the people that are coming to the church. It has an impact on the people that you're serving. When I used to serve high school, like before SMSB, like years and years ago, okay, our togetherness, like as a group, had a direct impact on the kids that we were serving. Like our oneness, our leaning on each other in good times and in difficult times had an impact on those kids. And those kids were more drawn to a more together group of service. They trusted us more. Like we had more credibility because we were all on the same page. We all believed in the same things, and we genuinely enjoyed being each other's company in the service and outside of the service. Like I'm telling you, I didn't start the service friends with these people. Okay. And you guys don't know me personally. I am very like I like my space. I like my privacy. Like all these people who have these like circles and discussions and people have to get vulnerable. Like that kind of stuff makes me uncomfortable. Like I don't know you. I'm not gonna get vulnerable with you because I don't know you. Like I don't feel an obligation to do that with anybody ever. Okay. But the people that you serve with are like your family. They are disposable. Your relationships are not disposable because the amount of effort that you put into your relationships with them is reflective on the amount of effort that you put into your service because they are tied together. The success of your service also reflects on like the success of your fellowship in your team of servants because people will read your dynamics and they will take what you do as an example of what you're talking about. And let me tell you, there is a lot less credibility for a group of servants that are like this than a group of servants that are like this. So your fellowship with whoever you serve with is important for your service, for the believers or the non-believers or whoever it is you're serving, the kids, the adults, the whatever your service is. It will impact whoever you are serving. And I mean, we talked about this, I don't even remember which talk it was in, about your motivation behind service. Okay. My opinion is that your motivation behind service should not be like, let's say I serve high school kids, which I don't. Okay. My motivation to serve is not to save the kids. There's nothing I'm gonna do that's gonna save the kids. My motivation to serve is not to like help Abuna out, do him a solid. Thank you. Like nobody cares if you're there or not there. Like I'm not going to save the service single-handedly. My motivation to serve is him. I'm doing this because I love him. This is all I have. This is the only way that I can show him that I love him. I'm serving for him. Like whatever happens in the service is secondary. I'm serving for him. And if I'm serving for him and he has told me that this fellowship with the people that I serve with is important and is a priority, you better believe that I should invest in it because he's asked me to. And I'm doing all of this for him. So if he says that these relationships are not disposable, they're not disposable. If he says bear one another's burdens, bear one another's burdens. If he says forgive each other, be hospitable without grumbling, stop your grumbling. Because I'm trying to give everything I can to the service and I'm trying to reflect him into my service. And if it's going to impact the people that he's asked me to serve, you better believe that I need to fix my issues. Why is fellowship important? Okay. I discussed this talk with my husband yesterday, okay? The ability to pray together, okay? I'm going to be very honest with you guys. Very honest. This is something that I very much struggle with. I always have, okay? Praying in a group is something that I have always struggled with. Always, okay? Like, and it's like all encompassing, like anybody, okay? It took me a long time to be able to pray with my husband when we got married because prayer to me, I'm a very personal person, okay? Like I like my privacy. I like things in my own box, like not for everybody else. It's just for me. Like I have very clear boundaries. You can ask, my parents and my in-laws and everybody, like I'm very clear about boundaries. Like I don't blur lines, okay? And so the idea of praying together has always been something that I personally have struggled with, personally, okay? There have been times in my life where I have been better at it, okay? And then I've come back down and then up and down, up and down. My personal discomfort or my personal feelings about it in no way negate the importance of it, okay? Do I know that it's important? I do. Does that make me better at it? No, it doesn't, okay? But do I recognize the importance of it? I do. How can you not when you look at things like James 5, where elders would get together to pray over someone and heal the sick in group prayer, okay? Where people would get together and accomplish the impossible in group prayer, okay? I understand the necessity of being able to pray together because I understand the magnitude of what can be accomplished when people pray together. I do. Am I bad at it? Very much. Why? Because I am probably missing fellowship with the people that I'm praying with. Like I said, I'm a very private person, okay? I don't do this like vulnerable, whatever thing with people. I don't do that, okay? The only time I have ever been comfortably able to pray together in a group is like, I can think of 2 separate groups in my life previous, okay? And I can honestly say that we were in fellowship as a group, 100%. Outside of that, it's very difficult for me, very difficult for me. And I think, and this is now like Sarah's own like opinion, okay, like take it with a grain of salt. I think that the necessity of praying together is clear. Everybody knows that. But the ability to pray together is tied to how strong your fellowship is. Because your ability to pray together is also a reflection or like an acknowledgement that you're all serving one common purpose and you're all like looking forward to one common outcome. And it's like verbal, like outwardly acknowledgement of that. And if you're not in fellowship with people, it's very difficult to do something that personal with people. I think. Okay, someone jump in and correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm speaking blasphemy or whatever. But this is my own like that I am in fellowship with someone or a group of someone's if I can pray with them. Like that's my commitment. Okay. And the reality is, we talked about this earlier, that part of the definition of fellowship is intimacy. To me, this is an act of intimacy. Being able to pray with somebody is an act of intimacy. Like I have never been the kind of person that can just go out for lunch with people that I don't really know and then everybody just prays. Like I want to be that person, but I'm not. I wish I was, but I'm not. Because to me, praying with people is an act of intimacy. But then it is an act of fellowship because it is an act of intimacy. Do you know what I mean? Hebrews 10:24, and let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. Okay? Why fellowship is important is that it also pushes each other towards the common goal. Like in order to stir up love and good works, like I'm pushing you to be better and you're pushing me to be better. And we can do that for each other without any hard feelings because we're in fellowship. Like this fellowship makes me better and it makes you better. And we are both better because of this fellowship. That's fellowship. That's true fellowship. Okay. Like my closest like fellowshippers, okay, like people or servants or whatever that I have been in fellowship with, I can't speak to what it did for them. I can only speak to what it did for me, and it made me better. It made me more consistent. It made me more accountable. It made me more likely to be a reliable servant. It made me more likely to show up and to give it my all and to plan in the off weeks and do things in the off hours. Like it made me more likely to be all in because they were able to stir up love and good works in me. They were. And it prevents discouragement. It prevents people from finding an excuse why they don't have to, or finding an excuse why they can't. Can't is the hard one, okay? Or finding a reason why not, okay? The service that I met my husband in, we used to serve in a Eritrean church. Like, oh, I miss that service so much. That service was like good for the soul, man. Like those kids and those servants, like they were good for the soul. Like that service, I always tell people, was a selfish service. Like I served because I love God. That church, I served because I love them. Okay, like that church was just good for the soul. Like it was just like a healing service. You come out of it and you just feel better. You feel happy. Okay, and one of the things that team of servants did for each other was preventing discouragement and encouraging each other. Like I was in school when we were serving that church, and I could literally have an exam Sunday because I went to York, okay? And I would be at that service on Saturday. Like I could literally be like destroyed for time. Like there is not humanly enough hours in the day for me to be able to go to service as well as do whatever studying or whatever exam or whatever I need to do. Like there was one time where I had an exam on Saturday night and you go to that service. Why? Not because I'm amazing and I'm such a great servant. It's because as a group of servants, we pushed each other. Not like keeping each other accountable and like, oh, you didn't show up and you have to come, you have to come. We made each other like want to go. Like we pushed each other forward. Like we helped each other. We encouraged each other. We uplifted each other, and that flowed into the service. Like that gladness and simplicity of heart and that like joy that we had together, serving together, flowed out into the service. And we encouraged each other and we pushed each other. And the reality is, like, from that service, yeah. Like I in every service I take away more than I will ever give, but that service I always say was completely selfish. Like that service, I felt like it just fed me. Like I needed it. Like I needed to be better, and I became better when I went, and I became better when I served with these people, and I was just better. I was better because they made me that way, and the people that we served made me that way, and they prevented me from feeling like service is like something that is not number one, or not something that you want to do. Like it became our like number one. Like if we had a choice between going to the Eritrean church or blah, 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 we all would always choose going to the Eritrean church because we loved it. Like we loved the service. We loved like the encouragement that we did for each other. Like we loved everything about it because we were in fellowship. It's been years since I talked about the Eritrean church. Now, okay, so for those of you that know me, okay, my talks are not usually like huffy fluffy and butterflies and lollipops and everything is happy and everything is great. So far, this has been pretty huffy fluffy and happy, like for me, like all the positives of fellowship and everything that it does for you and how it makes you feel and how it uplifts you and everything. Absolutely, okay? And I stand by everything that I just said, okay? But there is an angle to fellowship that we don't like to talk about, okay? Because when you think about service, we're serving God. Nobody doesn't get along and everybody loves each other and there's no drama and nobody hates anybody and everybody's there for the right reasons and blah, blah, blah. And we don't like to talk about that. We like to talk about servant drama, okay? So fine. You want to talk about your servant drama? Fine. You don't have any drama. That's fine. Let's talk about servant drama in the Bible, okay? When people tell me that the Bible is not relevant and it's not applicable, I just look at them like, really? Like, really? Have you ever read this? Have you ever read Elijah? Like, it is very relevant and very applicable. These are just normal people, okay? So this right here is, I didn't put the whole passage in because like St. Paul just kind of rambles a little bit, but a snapshot of the drama between St. Peter and St. Paul, okay? Those two, like, there was no love lost there for a while, okay? Like they butted heads. They did. And so that's why I mentioned earlier that the issue is not that servants disagree. Servants disagreeing is okay. And often it strengthens the service because people disagree and they come up with a way to include all the angles and push the service forward and make it better, okay? The issue is what happens behind that disagreement. what's the narrative that you're telling yourself, and like what does that do to your relationship after? Okay, so I'll just get someone to read because I've been talking a lot and I've given Mary a break today. Can I get someone to read this? Galatians 2:11-14. And if nobody volunteers, then I'm sorry. Come on, guys. Give Mary a break.
I can read it, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, when Peter had come to Antioch, I withstood him to his face, because he was to be blamed. For before certain men came from James, he would eat with the Gentiles. But when they came, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing those who were of the circumcision. And the rest of the Jews also played the hypocrite with him, so that even Barnabas was carried away with their hypocrisy. But when I saw that they were not straightforward about the truth of the gospel, I said to Peter before them all, if you, being a Jew, like in the manner of Gentiles and not as the Jews, why do you compel Gentiles to live as Jews?
So I'll give you a little bit of context here, okay? So St. Peter and St. Paul were like, they had different approaches, okay? St. Peter like was convicted and believed that they were meant to like evangelize to the Jews because Christ was a Jew and he came to save the Jews, and the Jews are the priority, okay? And like that's who they need to focus on here, okay? St. Paul was equally convicted about the Gentiles, that Christ came to save all men, and there's neither like slave nor free, like man nor woman, like Jew nor Gentile, like the Gentiles are equally important and they must be evangelized too, and okay? And they butted heads about it, okay? Because they had like they were both fiery, but their approach was different. Their common purpose was the same, which is to evangelize, okay, and to bring people to Christ. But Peter prioritized the Jews and St. Paul prioritized the Gentiles, okay? This particular issue, okay, there had been some meeting prior to this where St. Peter had agreed that like, okay, yeah, sure, we can also like evangelize to the Gentiles, like whatever, like that's fine, okay? Like we'll do the Jews and we'll do the Gentiles, like we'll conquer and divide, like, and it'll be fine, okay? So then Peter had come to Antioch, okay, and he was eating with Gentiles, which is like a sign of like being in communion with them, and like for the Jews that was very taboo because you don't do that, like you don't eat with non-Jews, right? Like you can only associate yourself with Jews, and to associate yourself with a non-Jew is like a leper, right? And so they had this agreement that they're going to evangelize to Jews and to Gentiles. And so Peter came and they were at Antioch and he was eating with the Gentiles, okay? And then when people came who were like Jews only, like they were focused on the Jews the way he was, he like did this, like, and he like, you know, like took a step back and like you know, tried to like dissociate himself and like stop doing what he was doing because he didn't want to like isolate or antagonize the people that came in. And then the people that were with him kind of followed his lead and did the same thing, right? So like 5 seconds ago, they were eating with the Gentiles and like, you know, breaking bread with them and whatever. And then the people who were focused on the Jews walked in and he kind of like took a step back and like changed his direction very quickly and made it look like he wasn't doing what he was doing. Okay. St. Paul losing it. Okay, because he's already like sensitive about this whole Jew Gentile issue, and then sees Peter like go from one end of the spectrum to another just because of who walks in the door, and loses it. Okay, loses it. So is St. Peter like in the wrong or not in the wrong? Like again, not for me to say. Okay, not for me to say. Later in the New Testament, Peter kind of changes his direction, and we talked about this in the previous series about Peter, where Peter is very like good about like self-reflection, and if he feels like he made a mistake, he can like acknowledge his faults and like just call it for what it is and change direction, and he's good like that, like he's humble like that. So was he in the wrong here? Like I don't know, who am I don't know, but later in the New Testament he does kind of change his direction with Cornelius and stuff, and he does kind of start to evangelize to the Gentiles. So that's Peter, okay? I disagreed with my husband a little bit about this passage yesterday also, because my husband was very like, well, St. Peter was wrong, Paul was right, blah, blah. And the St. Peter, St. Paul, like is a good reflection of like me and my husband. Like I'm very St. Peter and Rami is very St. Paul, right? And I'm all like rules and this and that, and Rami's all like love and feelings and that kind of stuff, right? So like that's kind of how we are in our marriage too. So he was just like, oh, St. Peter was wrong, and he corrected himself later, blah, blah, blah. And then my response was, okay, whether he's right or wrong is not for me to say, but we know in this situation that St. Peter is the elder, right? Like St. Peter was a disciple and was propagating the church before St. Paul ever even found Christ. Okay, like before he knew anything, when St. Paul was still massacring people, like St. Peter was a disciple, right? And St. Peter is viewed among the disciples and the apostles as an elder. Okay, like that's like me walking into liturgy and like telling Abuna that his sermon is wrong. Like, whoa, okay, like you can have your opinions, okay, but there's a way to do it. I'm never gonna, I hope, unless I have like a brain tumor or something, I'm never gonna walk into Abuna in a public meeting or whatever and just like wreck him and tell him all the reasons why he's wrong and this and that and call him a hypocrite and whatever. I'm never gonna do that because like there's a respect level there. And St. Peter is the elder here. Like, and he's also older than St. Paul, right? Like, so whether St. Peter was right or wrong or whatever, like that's one issue. And then the delivery of the disagreement is a separate issue. So there are many issues happening here that contribute to the two of them butting heads. And St. Paul here is very bold. Like it tells him, it says, I withstood him to his face because he was to be blamed. And then whatever, they were not straightforward about the truth of the gospel. Like you're a liar, basically, is what he's saying. And then like this like little rant of St. Paul's actually goes until like 19, verse 19. But like there's a lot of anger. Actual issues takes away from the point. The point is that they butted heads. The point is that they disagreed with each other. Okay. The point is that they did not get along and they did not agree on this issue and that they had a conflict with each other. They did. And this is like St. Peter, like the rock, and St. Paul, like the author of like, like half of the New Testament. Like these are two giants of the faith and they disagreed. So the issue in fellowship and in your service is not whether you're going to disagree. The issue is, how do you deal with it? Fellowship does not mean no disagreements. Fellowship does not mean that you guys agree about every single issue. That's not fellowship, okay? My husband and I are in fellowship. We don't agree on everything. My best friends and I are in fellowship. We don't agree on everything. It's not about being in agreement. It's about how do you handle that disagreement. The next time that St. Peter mentions St. Paul, he calls him our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom given to him. Like, we don't have a lot of like narrative of what happens in between, okay? We know that they disagreed. We know that they did, okay? But we know that that disagreement didn't break their relationship because here we are, however much time later, our beloved brother Paul, okay? Why did this not break their relationship? Like, look, okay? Like you can tell that I'm clearly like on a side, right? Like I'm particularly like I sympathize with St. Peter, okay? And my husband sympathizes with St. Paul. And you can tell, okay? But St. Paul, like, this was like a public gathering. And like whatever the issue is, he just like he gave it to him, right? Like that's bad. Like that's hard to get over. That's really hard to get over. Like he publicly shamed him and called him a hypocrite and called him a liar and humiliated him and essentially like took away all his credibility from the people that were in that gathering. Like apostles, disciples, Jews and Gentiles, like everybody was there. And he just wrecked him. Okay. I'm not the best at delivery in general. Okay. I get pretty mad too. But I would say that that's maybe not the optimal delivery if you disagree with somebody. And for me, like that's something that's pretty hard to get over. Like, having somebody do that in a public setting, like, that's hard to get over. But did they get over it? They did, because just a few chapters later, a few books later, our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom that was given to him, Peter acknowledges that St. Paul has wisdom and that he loves him. I mean, like, so we know that this didn't break their relationship. Why though? Why did this not break their relationship? Because they had one common purpose. This issue that they had is not about St. Peter or St. Paul. It's not about St. Peter being right or St. Paul being right. It's not about Jews. It's not about Gentiles. It's about, how do we do what he wants us to do? That's it. It's not personal, okay? It's got nothing to do with how I feel about you or how you feel about me. This is about the service. I'm here to serve. You're here to serve. I'm here because I love Christ. You're here because you love Christ. How do we do that? That's it. And that's why they were able to go from, like, he was wrong and I withstood him to his face, and they were not straightforward and he played the hypocrite and blah, 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 to our beloved brother Paul. Because this is not about them. This is about what's the right thing to do. And if you have something that you think is right and I have something that I think is right, let's battle it out, because the more right we are collectively, the better we serve him. This is not about us. So even though they clashed, were they in fellowship? They were. Did they have a common purpose? They did. Did they bear one another's burdens? They did. Like, did they forgive one another? They did. Did they have compassion for one another? They did. Did they love each other? Also, our beloved brother Paul. I'm going to assume so. So the point here is that it's not about agreeing or not agreeing. Fellowship is not always like lollipops and roses and butterflies. It's not. Sometimes you're going to disagree with the people that you're in fellowship with. But the lasting principle here is, what do you do with that disagreement? How do you deal with it? How do you cope with it? And what's the motivation and what's the end result? Is the motivation like serving him better? Yes. Okay, then it's not personal. And what's the end result? Do you hate each other? Have you cut each other off? Has somebody quit the service? You're not in fellowship, friends. You're not. Like, what St. Paul did here is, it's hard. It's hard for me to swallow, and I wasn't even there. But did it break their relationship? It didn't, because they were in fellowship. All right. I'm going to stop there because I didn't realize how long I've been going. Any questions, issues, concerns, arguments? Anything you want to fight about while we're in fellowship? Okay, I will hand it over to Verena and Abuna.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for a great talk. So this is part 2 of a 3-week series, a 4-week series, which means you have 2 more weeks to go. So we're just trialing out that new time. We know it might be a little bit later for some people. We're just trying to figure out a time that will work, given that, thank God, we can now get back at church, and there are 2 liturgies on Sundays. So if the time does change again, we will email you. We'll keep you posted. We'll put it on social media. But for now, it is from 1 to 2 o'clock. If you're not on our mailing list, please either leave your email right now in the chat, or email onroute@smsv.ca, and we will add your email to the mailing list. If you have any questions or suggestions or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. You can also email us at onroute@smsv.ca. That's all. Sarah, would you like to conclude with a prayer for us?
You follow me? I think you are.
Yes.
Sure. Because we're in fellowship, Marina. Sure.
Yes, we are.
Wait, Abuna here? Where's Abuna? Where's Abuna at?
I'm here, but we're in fellowship.
I'm in fellowship with you too. Why don't you pray?
You could go.
Alguno, lead us.
Okay. Just because we're in fellowship. All right. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for the words, Lord, that we heard today. We ask you, Lord, to help these words to really settle in our hearts, and Lord, and always that we live in fellowship, really in fellowship just to glorify your name. We're thankful for all the things that you have given us, those that are apparent and those things that aren't. We pray for all those that are in need and that don't have anyone to remember them, Lord. We ask you, Lord, that you remember them and you comfort them. We pray for the sick, Lord, and we pray for those that are struggling during this time. We ask for comfort, Lord, and we ask you, Lord, that we continue our journey and that we grow in encountering you and being just present with you at all times. We pray all this in your name. Amen. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. God bless you guys.
Thank you.